What's the dumbest thing you've ever witnessed someone get offended by? I had a lady very offended because I would not let her hold my few days old baby. This was a complete stranger at a grocery store. I learned to say to people ha, I'm a first time parent, and I don't even let my own parents hold her. Ha, seemed to do the trick without having to say you, perfect stranger, can hold my most precious, beloved and delicate possession when pigs fly. On my whiteboard at work I'd written the slogan no matter what happens, somebody will find a way to take it too seriously. After about a week, someone from HR came by and asked me to remove it because they had received a complaint. The irony was worth it. I put a happy birthday banner on my cubicle wall at work, but I added Jesus at the end. It was Christmas. Overly religious co-worker didn't approve. She didn't like my sorry you're leaving banner at Easter, and then the welcome back one shortly afterwards. Years ago, a woman came into my work and bought a black stove. The guys take the box up there to her and she flips the frick out because the box said Negro on it. Everyone tried explaining to her that it was the Spanish word for black, but she left there saying we were all racists. Similarly, I've gotten dirty looks for ordering a Negro Modelo at restaurant. I don't care though, because it's delicious. At a restaurant years ago, and this guy ordered a soup. He pulled a bay leaf out of the soup and went freaking mental. There's a leaf in my soup, and was convinced it was off the tree outside. Manager continued to explain it's a bay leaf, an ingredient for flavor, and this guy wasn't having it. Since then, anytime my wife cooks a soup we treat the leaf like the bean in a cake, and whoever finds it gets free reign over being super grumpy, as long as it's in a jest. I used to frequent a drive-thru near my job on my lunch breaks. After they repeated my order and told me to pull forward, I always said thanks before I drove to the window. One day, the manager comes to the window and says, "Hey, I'm gonna tell you something. Every time you come here and you say thanks, it just sounds really rude. Thanks is something you say with your buddies. Here you say thank you because you just sound really rude." Have not been back there since, and I immediately reported him to corporate when I got home. I worked fast food for 4 years of undergrad. Thanks would have made my day. I had a drama teacher get mad at me for pretending to be a werewolf in a skit. She claimed it was disrespectful of transgenders, which I suppose means that transgenders are werewolves to her. I guess I offended someone at my work because I insulted their intelligence. I run audio at conferences and the presenter kept turning away from his microphone. In the middle of his presentation he asks me what's wrong with the mic. I tell him there's nothing wrong with it, just be sure you speak into it. Then he got on my after saying don't tell Emmy how to do my job. Then do your job right and I won't have to. Don't call me so I'm not rich. Don't call me so I work for a living. Don't call me so I don't live in a castle. Don't call me mom I'm not old. Well, okay, mom. A BlackBerry fanboy buddy of mine got offended when a group of people mentioned that the company wasn't doing well. By offended, I mean he was red-faced angry, spitting while he talked, trying to tell them that BlackBerry has the best hardware. I thought his head was going to explode when they laughed at him. I had a stranger get upset because I covered my ears when emergency vehicles went by. He said I was showing disrespect or something. Frick that, those sirens are loud. You salute that emergency vehicle. A friend of mine got all pissy when I told him that my mother had to put down my sick, dying pet cat, apparently because I have no right to decide the death of another animal. I shouldn't make an imminent death less painful. Also, I didn't even know that my mother was putting the cat down until I came home from school and heard it from her. Someone at my school who lived on a farm was upset one day that a farm laborer had found an injured rabbit and killed it with a spade. She was horrified that he would do such a thing and claimed that he had no right to take another animal's life. Someone pointed out to her that she was a hypocrite because she went fox hunting and she shook her head and said no, that's different nuts. When my wife was serving at a restaurant, one of her co-workers got yelled at for saying sir to a black guy. He claimed that sir was a racial epithet. I'm definitely not one of those people who think that most black folks use racism to their advantage, but I have never heard of sir as an epithet and he did get a free meal out of it. I think someone was mixing up sir with boy. As a server, I once ran food out to a table with a young, less than 6 months old, baby, dressed in generic, brown baby clothing. I put the plates down in order, and when I got to the baby, I asked the mother, did she get anything? She glares at me with one of the most pee-off faces I've ever seen and snarls he's a boy, so I did the most logical thing I could think of, shrugged, said whoops, and left. All babies just look like potatoes to me. I went to a Catholic high school in an area surrounded by really awful public schools, so we had a good diversity of students from different religious backgrounds whose parents had some money. One day we were at lunch and talking about some physics project that involved a kite. This was a long time ago. Memory is not 100% on the details. So basically, we were all sitting at our lunch table having a conversation when one of my friends was in the middle of saying something along the lines of yeah, and then she wanted us to build and fly a kite made out of cardboard. Well, he kind of jumbled his words or something and said kike instead of kite. Everyone instantly knew what he meant because of the context of how it was said, and I don't think a lot of us even knew that kike was insulting or even a real word. But the one Jewish kid that sat at our table heard it and flipped his crap. He truly believed that it was a conscious mistake, and that the kid who said it was anti-Semitic. He held onto this grudge for nearly half a year, and not a single word exchanged between these two kids other than Jew-hating accusations and insults. All of us, about 20 kids total, each had to talk to him and tell him how ridiculous he was acting so we could get back to our normal lunch bulls, which consisted of arguing and insulting other tables. TLDR. 2 kids didn't speak for half a year because one misspoke kite as kike. For several years I taught a summer school class in filmmaking to elementary schoolers, who can be a very sensitive bunch. 2 stories. 1. We were discussing an action scene from Firefly, and I identified Zoe as the black woman. A couple kids gasped. That's racist. One volunteered. She's African American. I told them that black was not a racist thing to call people, and that Zoe could not in fact be African American, because she wasn't from America, she was from space. 2. One of the kids had pitched a movie about the Civil War, and in the discussion the Ku Klux Klan came up. Not everyone had heard of them, so I described them as a club for mean, angry people. They hate people for being different, like they hate black people. One of the boys jumped out of his chair. Mr. Luke Eben said something racist. He was trembling with righteous indignation. I didn't say I hate black people. I told him. I said they hate black people. I'm not a member of the Ku Klux Klan. That didn't satisfy him, so I ended up having to go with look, I'm Jewish. They would hate me too, and that calmed him down. The way I held my fork while sitting on the couch having a TV dinner. In such circumstances, I have no time whatsoever for cutlery etiquette. You're supposed to use your hands, not butt cheeks. Somebody once complained at my restaurant that their Swiss cheese didn't have enough holes in it. Why would you complain that you were getting more cheese than you were supposed to? The holes are always most delicious. It's always around the holidays when someone gets offended for another person wishing them happy holidays, Merry Christmas, whatever. The person meant no ill will. They could have easily said nothing. Yet someone always takes it like a personal assault on their beliefs. It makes me so angry because of how irrational it is. Bought some stuff at Target over the holidays. The cashier was a younger girl, probably late teens, and told me Merry Christmas. The look of wide-eyed horror on her face when she realized what she said, and then how she looked at me with dread while waiting for my reaction. Luckily I'm not an overly sensitive baby and said same to you. I worked at an AOL call center the day after the 2004 Super Bowl. You know, the one where Janet Jackson's titty made its appearance. And because AOL sponsored the halftime show, thousands of people called in to either cancel their accounts and, I crap you not, called to say they would never sign up for AOL because of that titty. People would bafflingly wait up to 3 hours in the call queue just to say that even though they didn't have AOL, that exposed titty cemented their resolve to never sign up. It was one of the worst days to ever work there. Worse than 9/11. It was the day that I realized how foolish and petty people can be about one single African American titty. Bahaha, it was worth wading through this thread to read this comment. Eating at a locally owned, family-run, authentic Vietnamese restaurant. A roommate's boyfriend, who I've posted about several times. He is basically the epitome of a white male Tumblr feminist social justice warrior. Accused me of culturally appropriating their food and forcing them to cater to me because I am white. When I pointed out as a kid my neighborhood suddenly had a large influx of Vietnamese immigrants and knew the family personally and have been going to their restaurant for years. Even bringing every guest couchsurfer to the place, he tells me they don't make the restaurant for white people. Stop smothering them with your privilege. This guy went from a broke as frick Vietnamese immigrant to having an insanely popular restaurant. People drive from the other side of the city 45 minutes to eat there, and 13 years after opening there is always a wait no matter what day or time you go, and was able to pay for his 3 children's college education. I think he likes white people money. 2. I have one. In college I saw the guy from class on the bus. We started talking a bit. He starts to tell me about his big plans with Maria. Maria this and Maria that. I have no idea who Maria is. So I am thinking and thinking. Then I remember seeing him being friendly with someone in our class. So I said, "Oh, that girl in our class," and he looked at me with a dead-eye stare and said, "Maria is not that girl. She has a name. Her name is Maria." He was offended that I wasn't respecting her personhood enough because I called her that girl. He then stopped talking to me. My mom does that. In conversation every time I refer to her as she gets angry and states I'm not a she, I'm your mother. I used to serve in a fancy restaurant. Had a guy get peeved because I brought him brown sugar when he specifically asked for brown sugar? No, I want the sugar in the brown packet. I used to live with a black guy from the UK. One night we went out to a local bar and started talking to some random people. A random white woman got upset I called my roommate black during a discussion about something. The correct term is African American according to her. Even the Brits are African American. Whole bunch of African Americans in Africa. Once I was at my step-grandfather's house. Not long after my dad had gotten remarried. They were discussing how they were going to drive together to New Jersey from Maryland and back in the same day to pick up a car. Of course, they'd be getting back late. Probably 1 AM or so. So my dad said he'd just crash on their couch since he'd be tired. Probably a 40-minute drive to his house from theirs. I told him I'd probably be close by around that time because it was my D&D night and I stay up late anyway. So I could pick him up so he could sleep at home if he wanted. Suddenly, I'm met with dead silence and eventually my dad politely declines and says it's okay. Later he told me not to talk about stuff like D&D around my stepfamily because they're religious. For frick's sake. I was trying to do someone a favor, and because I decide to spend my evenings rolling dice and drinking Mountain Dew I get the silent treatment. TL. DR. Stepfamily thinks icosahedrons are offensive apparently. Icosahedrons are a gateway device. Next thing you know, you're summoning gazebos from heck. I've met people who have been offended by me not allowing them to pat a dog that has syringomyelia, neurological spinal disorder, causes immense pain if touched during episodes. I explained to them that this dog, a cavalier, can get aggressive and snappy if he has an episode and it's not something that we can detect easily. They told me that I shouldn't be walking an aggressive dog, as it may bite someone who wants to pat it. Well, people shouldn't try to pat dogs before asking if it is okay. At work one day a woman asked for a iced green tea with light ice. She made it a really big deal that she wanted light ice. I was still somewhat new and asked my co-worker how much ice was considered light. I made the joke that maybe we should use little ice cubes and we laughed about it. This woman overheard us and blew up. She demanded to speak to my manager and said that we were making fun of her. Told him they said maybe we should use little ice cubes. At this point my manager could see how stupid this situation was and told the woman he would deal with it. He just told us not to talk about customers while in hearing distance and went back to work. That was manager for stop doing things that makes me have to do things. I got in a heated debate with a woman who refused to allow me to call a Jamaican friend of mine black. She insisted I should refer to him as African American. Around 1993 or so, When my kids were just small and the family was all going to church, Baptist, we were all at a social and my daughter was wearing some little girl clothing from Oshkosh B'gosh. And this one really snooty guy from Sunday school said he would never allow his kids to wear something so offensive as he considers B'gosh to be taking the Lord's name in vain. I was so taken back by his statement and attitude that I didn't say anything. But in reality he was just trying to prove how super spiritual he was. I finally just realized that I didn't have much in common with these people and stopped going. When I was a cashier at Borders, I had one lady get offended because I called her by a man's name. The stupid thing was that she was picking up a book her husband had shipped to the store and his name was on order. Oh, you must be the dong who ordered this book. I was commuting from Albany, NY to Brooklyn for a little while and would drive past a town called Fishkill, NY. I stopped there once to get gas. At the gas station was a bunch of people, much more than normal for such a small town. I heard them talking about how they were from Petter and there to protest the town, because it was called Fishkill. I saw one of the protesters get in an argument with a townie and then heard the townie say kill is Dutch for creek you butthole. To this day the funniest thing I have ever witnessed. A guy friend dressed up as, post-Vietnam, wheelchair-bound, Lieutenant Dan, and his girlfriend dressed up like Forrest Gump for a Halloween costume contest at our local bar. They won, but not before a drink girl had to yell at my friend that his costume was offensive to people in wheelchairs. I knew I should have just gone as Bubba. Visiting NY while studying English in Boston for the summer in 2003. I was sitting in a bar with other Spanish classmates as we were planning what to see and where to go in the city. We are speaking Spanish between us but with Castilian accent and speaking really fast. A Jamaican look-like guy in an expensive suit stops at our table after paying his takeout meal and asks us very friendly, "Where are you from, guys?" We smile and say proudly, "Spain." His face suddenly changes to an angry expression. He flipped us the bird and said "Get out of my country, M," and then left. I was once talking about how I visited the Grand Tetons and talked a little about the geology since I found it very interesting. One of the people I was eating lunch with was very offended I suggested something might have happened 2 million years ago. Backstory. Back in 1999 or so, a small group of us made the pilgrimage to Memphis to spend the weekend eating ribs and touring Graceland. During a taxi ride from Beale back to our crappy motel, barreling down 240 at least 90 miles per hour, the taxi driver is completely turned around facing us in the back seat. He has sock puppets on both his hands, knees on the wheel. As we scream and white knuckle anything we can hold onto, the sock puppets tells us racist jokes that are so horrible, even Reddit would be offended. He swerved from lane to lane and scared the crap out of all of us. It's a miracle we didn't all die. The offense. Years later, I was the best man at the wedding of one of the fellow riders in that cab. In referencing all the exciting adventures we'd had together, I alluded to the racist puppet show in my best man speech. A friend of the bride who was in an interracial marriage stood up, berated me for being a racist butthole, took her gift back from the gift table and left. Talk about a tense crowd for the rest of that speech. I was able to play it off and finished the last half of what I had to say. Everyone else thought it was a nice speech. To be clear, I didn't tell the story. I didn't repeat any of the jokes. All I did was list a series of unrelated, yet noteworthy events that occurred during my years of friendship with the groom. It was later explained to me that this girl loved playing the race card since she was a white girl married to a black guy. When the husband, who returned to the wedding with the gift about an hour later, explained to her that nothing racist was said, only that the word racist had been used as an adjective, she was too embarrassed to come back. All she heard was the word racist and her instincts kicked in. I do not like those kinds of people. I was standing at a bus stop with another lady. She was yelling on her phone and I was watching a movie on mine. We had both just missed the previous bus and had to wait another 25 minutes or so for the next one. Given her rather unstable condition, she was very upset at something. I tried to blend into my surroundings as best to my abilities. I didn't last too long. She said something rather outrageous along the lines of how her BF cheated on her with someone. Being stunned, I lacked the restraints to look at her. Unfortunately, we made eye contact and that's where it all went downhill. For the next 20 minutes she yelled at me, thinking that I was the S that corrupted him. She ended every sentence with white hooded B as I was wearing a white Eskimo-like jacket with a hood up. Apparently she also thought that I grew up in a place called Red Deer, Alberta, I had to Google it afterwards, and that I had slept with hundreds of guys. For your information, I have only ever dated or had sex with a single person. Just so you get a sense of how stunned I was at these comments. I didn't say a single thing to her during this entire 20-minute episode, and only talked when I had to convince other bus patrons that I had never met this woman before. TLDR, I'm a white-hooded bee from Alberta who slept with every man in town. My cousin and his friend were waiting in line at the movie theater to see Titanic back in college. They're joking around and say something like, "I wonder what happens at the end of the movie. Oh, I heard the boat sinks and everyone dies." The lady in front of them in line was furious and turned around and yelled at them for spoiling the end of the movie. I opened the door and let the lady behind me enter first, and she got offended and said she could open her own doors. Funny thing is that I do that for whoever is behind me, couldn't care less if it's a guy or girl. There was a big uproar in DC some years back where an official called a budget item niggardly and ended up having to resign because the hate speech police can't use dictionaries. This reminds me of when the pediatrician's house was attacked in the UK because people got confused about words. At the time, the press were whipping the nation into a frenzy about pedos, and some poor child doctor got accused of being a child molester. On the flip side, Speedy Gonzales, the fastest mouse in all of Mexico, was taken off the air a while back for fear of racial stereotypes. That is, until a bunch of Hispanic groups wrote into Warner Brothers and said that it was really great to have some of their culture represented in the cartoons, and to bring Speedy back. Go figure. As a ginger, I called another ginger a ginger in reference to her hair, and this gingerly girl thought I was a racist. Ginger isn't even a race. A friend in high school couldn't believe I put my seatbelt on when in his car with him driving. We didn't stay friends for very long. A few years ago, I was working in a restaurant. A female patron asked me to tell another woman to stop breastfeeding, as the sight of breasts offended her, all the whilst wearing a rather revealing top which exposed more boobage than the woman breastfeeding. Whole reason I couldn't breastfeed in public. No matter how much I tried, I couldn't hide any part of my boob except my nipple. I wasn't very good at breastfeeding. When I was 16, I moved to the south and was a cashier at Winn-Dixie. I was away from my register stocking candy and noticed someone was waiting for me at my register. Just as I noticed, an older black couple came to the lane I was stocking in and asked if I could check them out, and I told them I could at my register and pointed at where I was. So I went and rung up the customer who was waiting for me and didn't see the older black couple again. At the end of my shift, my manager sat me down and said that an older black couple said I had refused to ring them up and that I was racist. I'm white. I was 16 and it was my first job, and I had moved from California and had never been exposed to racism. It ruined my day at the time. I have a friend who is allergic to gluten. If you ask her about it, she gets super crappy and offended. Naturally, we used to like to ask what her diet has to consist of. We all used to eat dinner together and it would just come up in conversation from time to time. Everything seemed just fine. Then we found out from her roommate that she would come back super pissed off that we asked her questions. We had no clue. We just wanted to know and were curious about how many things out there have gluten in them. God, that girl is awful. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.